As part of the premarital counseling that I require for the weddings that I officiate, I ask that the couple write out what I call a spiritual ketubah, a document that is meant to get into the more emotional and spiritual side of coming together in partnership, an aspect that the original Aramaic doesn't quite touch on because it's preoccupied with sheep dowries. And so for this exercise, I asked my couples to answer two fundamental questions that each of them are to answer individually, and then we come together to discuss those answers. Evelyn and Fred, if you want to do this too, it's 50 years, you can do this as well. The first, what are you bringing to this marriage? In the actual ketubah, this is a monetary question. It's a question about finances. But for the spiritual ketubah, it is a personal question. What are your strengths as a partner? Are you a good listener? Are you a good planner? Good at keeping things calm in stressful situations? What are you bringing to your marriage? The second question is, what are you bringing to this marriage that might be a challenge? Which functions as a kind of antithesis to the previous question. What are some of the weaknesses, your weaknesses, that you're bringing to this marriage? Are you impatient? Are you unorganized or messy? Stuff like that. Evelyn and Fred, you don't have to answer out loud. And without fail, every time that I do this, every time, when we sit down and go through the lists, my brides, my grooms, they all say the exact same thing. Okay, I got tons for my second list. I struggled with the first one. Always. Always. When asked to come up with lists of strengths and weaknesses, invariably the weaknesses are easier. In fact, they struggle with the first. And that might feel surprising because when we see how people express themselves in our lives, whether in public, in social media, whatever it might be, the impression is quite the opposite. We see people brimming with confidence, speaking on subjects and issues with completely unwarranted certainty, projecting these big images of authority and experience. But you know what? And I recognize that we all know this deep down, but I think we need a reminder sometimes. That's not real. That's not real. Maybe for a tiny fraction of people, but for the overwhelming majority of people in this world, it's just not real. I think that the nature of human beings is to be second-list people. It is in our nature to focus on our shortcomings, on our hang-ups, our imperfections, our blemishes. And in our modern world, that is teased out to a dramatic and honestly quite concerning degree. Today, truly, we don't really need enemies because nobody is crueler to us than us. And as Jews, we know that all too well. This past Wednesday, led by our incredible Rosh Chodesh Vad, we ushered in the month of Av. And with it, the 9 days, which will culminate this week with our communal commemoration of Tisha B'Av, when we come together to read Eicha and mourn the tragedies that have befallen our people for more than 2,000 years. The melancholy, the gravitas of marking those moments, that alone would be a lot to hold on to and bear. But as Jews, we have been told to go a step further and proclaim, based on the theology of our rabbis, that not only did these terrible things happen to us, but they happened because of us. It's the most Jewish thing I could possibly say. The destruction of our temples, the exile of our people, unthinkable pain and violence and hate. Our sages put the weight of that responsibility directly onto our shoulders. Because to them, because to them it was easier to say that we are punished for our collective sins, that we deserve our trauma and our brokenness because ultimately we are the progenitors, than to acknowledge that sometimes life is just chaos, unfair, even cruel. To understand that reality doesn't say anything about God or about us. Rather, it says a lot about how much we don't understand about life, about one another, and about ourselves. And that lack of understanding makes it so much easier to turn to despair, to doubt, and to deprecation. That lack of understanding is what makes us second-list people. But that is not who we are asked to be. It's not. We know that it's not. Because ultimately the message of our peoplehood, the message of our tradition, the message of Torah is not a dark fixation on tragedy. It sure feels like that sometimes. It does. But that is not the ikar, that is not the essence of who we are. The message of who we are comes directly from our last book of Torah, the book that we started just this past week, that we read from this morning, the book that carries us through the darkness of Av and into the redemption of Elul and Tishrei, into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the book that biblical scholars believe was the only book that our ancient kings referred to as Torah. The message of this book, of Deuteronomy, of Devarim, this last scroll, is wholly and unwaveringly list one. It's beautifully list one. And I know that some of you have heard me talk about this before, but it's important, so I need to mention it again. And that is that the reminder that Devarim, that the book of Deuteronomy, is a shift from that traditional narrative of the first person, of the third person, into the first person. It's Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to his family, speaking to this huge, beautiful Jewish family. And it's intentionally a direct 180 from the moment when God showed God's self to Moshe and said, "I need you," to which Moshe responded, "You have the wrong guy. You clearly mean someone else. Because I am flawed and imperfect and filled with all kinds of issues." And God answers him by saying, "I know who you are. I need you." It's a direct 180 because the Moses of Devarim doesn't say, "You've got the wrong guy. You need someone who doesn't have a speech impediment, who doesn't show anger and frustration, who needs significant help." The Moshe of Devarim, the Moses of Deuteronomy, is still that person with all those issues. But this time he speaks to the people he loves, and he tells them how much they've achieved, how wonderful they are, and most importantly, how much they have left to accomplish. And he does so in poetry. The man with the speech impediment speaks to his people in poetry. This is the message of our people, that we are so profoundly broken, that we mess up, that we have parts of us that make us feel self-conscious, less than, and that sometimes we can feel like failures, like we can feel unworthy, as if to say, clearly, you've got the wrong guy or the wrong woman. But we can't live there. We can't live in that list. Because if we do, we become paralyzed. We miss the whole point. That life, that Judaism, that our purpose in this world is to give, is to contribute, is to create that world in partnership. The message of who we are is not Tisha B'Av, it is Devarim. It is not theological victim blaming or taking on the responsibility for unthinkable tragedy. These days of Av are meant to remind us of our brokenness, not to make us feel guilty or ashamed, but to inspire us to write list 1 and get to work. The message of who we are is the poetry of our existence. Acknowledging our faults, our falters, and then pushing forward not in spite of them, but because of them. Knowing that where we are is sometimes weak, and that sometimes where our weakness is, others will be strong. And sometimes where we are strong, we are needed desperately so that we can show this world just how beautiful and how important it is. That is partnership. That is Torah. That is Judaism. This week, it is so easy to feel that second list. It's easy to feel that second list. It's easy to feel the blame, the unfairness, the things that we lack, and the ways that we are broken. It's easy because of our calendar. It's easy because of the pain our community is feeling. But our prerogative during these days is to fill our second list, and to do so with compassion and love. Because we need one another. We all need one another. I know exactly who you are. I need you. This world needs us. I'm sorry if I'm the only one who's ever told you this, but you are broken. You are imperfect. You are flawed. And, not but, and you are necessary. You are invaluable. You are poetry in a world that can feel silent, and you need to know that because there is work to do. Today, on this sacred day of Shabbat, as we come together to pray, to sing, to celebrate, to mourn, to be in community and family, I encourage you as you're standing one-on-one with the one who spoke and the world came into being to write your list, your second list. We've spent enough time on the second list. Let's write the first one. Let's focus on all of the good that we're bringing into this world. Because today we need that list. We need it. And this is exactly who you are, who we are, and who we are meant to be. Shabbat Shalom.